And good evening to our fellow listeners and followers. This is Federico Lines of States Rights Radio and
Seth Hancock of Seth Hancock Reports. And tonight's episode is Understanding the Commerce Clause. And did the framers mean for Congress to administer? What did the framers mean for Congress to administer or regulate?
Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I was gonna just add to that the Commerce Clause is that clause that has been used by big government Democrats and big government Republicans for decades to justify their unconstitutional actions.
Correct. And, the way the Commerce Clause reads, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, the Congress shall have power, in parentheses, in brackets, not parentheses, brackets, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. In reading, people, if you want to be with correct grammar, look at every single article within the Constitution. There is brackets, there is parentheses, there are commas. There's one comma in the Second Amendment. So, people have misinterpreted this clause, and I'll let you start with your interpretation of the Commerce Clause, Seth.
I think the intention of the Commerce Clause was to just make sure that commerce was being allowed to freely flow through the states, that there weren't going to be overburdensome laws in each state to basically slow the travel of goods across borders within the United States. It was never meant to turn into this massive regulatory state that the federal government has with the FDA, the USDA, goes into the healthcare with CDC. It never was meant to be this this massive regulatory system. It was to just make sure that the states were allowing goods to travel between states. And that's kind of what we got recently. This is a U.S. Supreme Court decision a couple weeks ago regarding a California law. Let's see, I got the name here. National Pork Producers Council v. Ross. And it was based on a California voter initiative that banned pork products in the state, not farmed, with specific measures promoting animal welfare. So basically, California voters want pork to be raised with some certain welfare in mind. I have not looked at specifically that law to see how burdensome it is, but you can imagine what California voters might support. But out-of-state pork producers are saying that it's going to cost them a lot of money to comply with the California law. And the Supreme Court sided with the California law, basically saying that they're allowed to put these burdensome regulations on out-of-state farmers, which, to me, I honestly think this is kind of an interesting question, because California can put whatever regulations it wants in place, but I think they can only put it on California farmers. That's my opinion. I think they should only be allowed to regulate California farmers, not out-of-state farmers. But I think the Supreme Court got this one wrong.
In noting that law, Gorsuch, Associate Justice Gorsuch noted that the California law didn't apply a different standard to out-of-state pork farmers and instead treated local pork producers equally through California's pork industry accounts. My main concern is that if Iowa can't, if Iowa farmers or the Iowa farmers are seem to having trouble to do business with a state like California, there are 49 other states where they will be happy to comply with your pork standards and let California go. That's the genius of this country, is that if California is not able to do business with Iowa or Indiana or whoever, then okay, Iowa will go somewhere else and without any federal judicial review. And I know I mentioned to you this earlier, Seth. I'm really tired that every single case is for up to judicial review. Ever since Marbury versus Madison, I really want that case overturned. We don't need judicial review. I mean, judicial review on certain constitutional issues, but on every single thing, it doesn't need to go through the court. This is something that needs to go to California state legislative review, not judicial review. So, and I know that Gorsuch said something else. I'm trying to find it. Let me see. I'll find it, but that's mainly my take of that case. And California can do whatever it wants. There's another case in California back in 2005 where they had medicinal marijuana, where in that case they were asking other states and the federal government to come in and help them enforce their law. And Scalia, in his infinite wisdom, he sided with the Commerce Clause because there was nothing under state sovereignty that should allow other states or the federal government to come in and regulate a law that's California law. I mean, that's a California budget. California voted for it, and it should be California. Why should Nevada come and help them out with Nevada funds to help enforce a California law? So, California as well as New York, they are the modern day states like Pennsylvania and Massachusetts back in 1789, where they think the rules don't apply to them and they want their rules to apply to everybody else. And that's not how the system works. What say you, Seth?
I would generally agree. I think this case is kind of interesting in that we're kind of talking about a big business, the pork industry, kind of being challenged here. The one thing I want to note is that the Commerce Clause and this the use of it to create this overburdensome regulatory climate, really who it affects is the small farmers, the small businesses. We've got agencies, these regulatory agencies that have been targeting small farmers for a while now, banning the sale of raw milk or things like I wrote a few years ago about this Amish farmer, Amos Miller, who was targeted by the USDA because he's Amish, and so he wouldn't use the technology the USDA was requiring him to use. And he never harmed anybody with his products, but they targeted him anyways. And it's become this clause that has allowed corruption to become rampant, where they're really protecting the big monopolistic type big corporation interests rather than free market little guys who are just trying to compete. And that's kind of the biggest problem with the way it's been abused is it's allowed the government to basically protect the big guys at the expense of the little guys.
Oh no, you're right there, and it's always been like that. Central government trying to attack the small farmer, dairy farmer, wheat farmer, and I mentioned wheat because one of the biggest, the biggest control that it had was in 1942, where the federal government said how much wheat a farmer can produce. I mean, this happened in Soviet Russia. This doesn't happen in the United States. When I read the famous case Wickard versus Filborn, and I was reading Justice Robert Jackson's original opinion, the majority opinion of the court, it was like something out of Stalin Russia, and it was despicable. Here you have a farmer of Ohio, Roscoe Filborn, and he's growing his wheat on his own. He is not there to sell it, not there to distribute it, not there. He's just for private consumption. And his only crime was that he made a larger amount of wheat above the quota that the Department of Agriculture was forcing other farmers to endure. Now, here's the thing that happened on that is that the Department of Agriculture sent a quota that you have to build this much wheat, and if you didn't produce as much as they said, you're going to get the same amount paid for a farmer that grew much, but yet you couldn't grow much, and Roscoe Filburn got punished for that. So it's control and it's misinterpretation. And again, I say that the clause has brackets on the Congress shall have power. I believe that the framers did not intend, and I've argued this with friends of mine, with colleagues of mine, the framers did not intend to have a central government bureaucracy stationed in one place, either in New York City or Philadelphia or Washington City or Atlanta, Georgia, or even Austin, Texas. I mean, that was the whole point of this Constitution, whether it's the Articles of Confederation or the 1787 Constitution. It is made by the states and for the states with an administrative federal government. So, to have this is just ridiculous. And I'll get to one more case where I'm reading about the heirs to the framers, Webster, Calhoun, and Clay, and I'll get to that. That it also gives power to the federal government under the Commerce Clause. But it never ceases to amaze me that the lens that people will go to misinterpret the Constitution just to fit their own agenda. It never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, and I think the Wickard v. Filburn case that you bring up, I think that had to deal with New Deal laws.
Yes, that's correct.
And
part of the New Deal program.
And if you look at the New Deal, I mean that this was just this massive. This was like kind of the start of the federal government really becoming the burdensome, massive central authority on everything. Kind of stems from that New Deal programs. Certainly there were things beforehand, but that's one of the worst travesties in American history. The New Deal policies and.
Well, it was again one of the most. Yeah, you're right. One of the most terrible programs that ever came out of Washington City. But thanks to the 16th Amendment in the Federal Reserve Act, that's the reason we got it, because we have become dependent of the federal government. So but it didn't really. The things that many people think that the problems just a little bit off topic, and then I'll get back on track. That also the lies that come out, that people blame people like Calvin Coolidge for what happened to the Great Depression and the stock market crash. And from 1924 to 1929, America was thriving. Main Street was thriving. Wall Street was booming. You had free trade. You had no tariffs, no regulation, no government intervention whatsoever. Then comes Herbert Hoover. And many people have forgotten this, Seth. Here comes Herbert Hoover, and he's the one that installs these policies of government regulation and taxation and tariffs. And of course, the people that were having the luxury of this, they got spooked, and that's why they took their money out, and that's why the stock market crashed. It wasn't because of keep cool with Coolidge. It was his policies were making America wonderful. I don't want to say great, but wonderful. And so that, and then of course here comes FDR with his New Deal, and help the forgotten man, as he liked to call it. And the New Deal programs did not stimulate 1 inch of the economy, not 1 inch. It just made it worse until the Second World War came about. But you're right, that Wicker versus Filburn came with one of the New Deal programs that really suffered for America. And one other case I want to touch, two other cases we should touch base. One, I don't know if you're familiar, back in 1824 with the great John Marshall Court, Gibbons versus Ogden. That was the first case where they touched on the Commerce Clause. And here you have a fisherman coming into the port of New York, and he gets a huge tariff to enter the port of New York. And of course, he complained to Daniel Webster, and they take the case of the Supreme Court. And of course, they said that the federal government has regulations for trade and commerce, and that's why the New York law was found unconstitutional. And again, this also fits the narrative with this pork law in California. If New York has a tariff that you can't do business, then you find another port to do business. There's Philadelphia, there's Portsmouth, there's Savannah, there's Charleston. There's multiple ports where you can do, multiple cities where you can do business. And if New York cannot, is not willing to budge, then okay, you say, New York, bye-bye, I'm going to Philadelphia, I'm going to Boston Harbor. So, it comes back to individualism. It comes back, as you always said, Seth, individualism and liberty and sovereignty and the choice to do business with whoever and whatever without the hint of federal government. That's, I think, what the framers intended, is individualism and self-reliance. I don't know if you're familiar with that case, Gibbons versus Ogden.
No, I'm not familiar with that case, but just on what you just said there, on individualism and self-reliance, it's just that's self-evident when you look at the founding of this country, that is exactly what the founders wanted. That was the whole idea of the revolution was independence. It didn't. And, you just look at, like Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. The whole idea was that we would have a free market system instead of this crony capitalist system we've become. It's just... I just believe that the government is not there to help us. It's there to protect our liberty, and the Commerce Clause has been used to destroy our liberty, which is completely antithetical. You just read all the writings of the founders, and you'll have an understanding of what they were aiming at with the whole Constitution. And yeah, it's not to have an FDA. It's not to have a CDC. It's not the government is not an appropriate regulator. And I look at it this way when it comes to business. I basically am against a government regulatory climate. I think the government should have laws that, if a business harms somebody and you can prove that they did it knowingly or something, that there could be laws that are broken. But we shouldn't have this onerous regulatory climate from the federal government. And I also look at it this way. Some people might say, well, you don't think business should be regulated at all? Well, I say in a free market system, it creates the appropriate regulator, which is the consumer. Mm-hmm. The consumer gets to regulate the markets by where they choose to do business. I think the consumer is a far better regulator and can even be a tougher regulator than the government. But we've just completely perverted things with letting the central command and control authority to enter in.
Oh, you're right. When people always say that, oh, well, you don't think Wall Street should be regulated? And I go, wait a minute, isn't the same... it's the same Wall Street that you regulated the 2008 financial crisis or Bernie Madoff. How many bells did people say, hey, this guy is conducting a Ponzi scheme, how come you're not doing anything? And of course, the SEC has not done anything, did not do anything. And then you had created a CFPB, Consumer Protection Bureau, whatever it's called, and just the same thing with INS, with ICE. It just creates multiple bureaucracies just to have the federal government say, we're here to take care of you. We're here to sugarcoat it to make it all look nice. And, it's you're right with your point. Regulation starts with the consumer. The consumer says, you know what? California, if you have high prices on pork standards because you want the pig to have a better living habitat, then that's fine. I mean, great. I'm not going to pay your prices. I'm going to go to Oregon. I'm going to go to Nevada. I'm going to go somewhere else, see if they're going to take my pork and be done with it. Or, if New York wants to have a high tariff act, okay. Then I'm sure the Bostonians will give me some baked beans and a good price for my produce and my product. So it all comes back to that self-reliance, not dependent of a government and a federal government to boot. And before we go on to another case that is affected by the Commerce Clause, Chief Justice Marshall, which I'm not a big fan of him, he coined the phrase, he coined a quote, "The power to tax involves the power to destroy." Now, when I read that the first time, the power to tax involves the power to destroy, I thought that, he would be on my side. But no, he's actually saying on the side of the state government doesn't have the right to tax because the state government will have the power to destroy. Well, the thing is that if you look at now, it's the federal government that's taxing us and is destroying our very livelihood because of their taxes and because of the 16th Amendment. So, Chief Justice Marshall is creating this spin story of making state governments look bad, and here comes the savior of the federal government to look good. And that's why, many people have used that quote, and I read it and I go, this doesn't sound right coming from a man like John Marshall. So, it's the federal government always trying to sugarcoat it, always trying to be the savior. And we're not looking for a savior here. We're just looking for self-reliance, sovereignty, and liberty per the founding documents, per the Constitution. And I just think that people need to really understand when you read the Commerce Clause, just look at it carefully and really think, is this really a function of the federal government? And I hope they do, because, people need to start really grasp inside, defining every single letter, every single word, every single comma, every single grammatical point, because it's an impact on your life. And if you miss something, the federal government will take it away from you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, basically, people need to kind of think about, what exactly is the federal government's authority. And, I have this view that people have come to view government as authority, which it's not. Government has some authority. They are not this big authoritative body that gets to tell us every aspect of our lives what is the proper way to live. And if we accept government as authority, then we're nothing as people. I mean, and that's we need to desire liberty and independence and being able to run our own lives. And we just too many people just want to be taken care of today, and that's the big problem.
And that is a big problem, and that's why I have refused to give my vote to whoever goes into a presidential campaign or a senatorial campaign, because they're only out to make the federal government bigger. And I'm saying no. I mean, even in this state government of Florida, I did not vote for neither DeSantis or Charlie Crist, because both of them are looking to expand their own government, which is fine, the state government, but they're looking to expand. So now we see Ron DeSantis running for president, and I said to myself, if he's made the Florida government really big and powerful, do I trust him to run the federal government? No. And neither did Trump, and that's why I didn't vote for Trump or Biden, because both of them want to increase the government in their own mind, in their own way, and that's not what I want. I don't want more Homeland Security. I don't want more Department of Justice or FBI or ATF or CDC or FDA or Department of Labor, Department of Transportation. I don't want that. So that's why I refuse to give my vote to people like that, and then now comes Robert Kennedy Jr. His father, may rest in peace, but he was the kind of man that wanted to increase government in social programs and continue the social programs of the Great Society. And I don't know if his son wants to do that, or he's a more libertarian like his uncle, JFK. I'm worried about that. So yeah, people need to, and now this thing with social programs, with the health care and the welfare, health care is not a right in the Constitution. It's not. It's a privilege, or it's a purchase, and it should be between the states, the commerce. If California has 3 companies with insurance companies, and Nevada wants to come in to negotiate, they should be allowed with no regulatory force. And reading King versus Burwell and all those Supreme Court hearings based on the Affordable Care Act, it should not be, this thing with the Commerce Clause that government, has the right to regulate healthcare business across state lines. It's a misinterpretation, and it's misleading the American public.
Yeah. When we talk about healthcare, obviously, Obamacare was a big thing. We get things like Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act because of, and I don't like calling it Obamacare. It's just how we know it, because, we could even call it Romneycare if people wanted to know the history. But we get these things because of the Commerce Clause. I mean, we get this climate like this where the government steps in, and in effect, this is what leads to lockdown over a virus, because of the government thinking that it controls us. If people want to know what the problems are, is because the government is interfering where it has no business interfering. And you look at healthcare, the insurance industry. If we had an actual free market system, number one, there wouldn't be a need for as much insurance as we get. I mean, the insurance industry has been benefited from big government. You kind of look back, I think this was also FDR. I might be wrong on this, but the idea of benefits through your employer came because of the federal government dictating a maximum wage. It wasn't just a minimum wage. At one point, there was a maximum wage imposed by the federal government. And so businesses started offering benefits, and they started offering health insurance. Well, the way I look at it is health insurance is appropriate to buy for like big ticket health expenses, like you have a heart attack and you have this big bill that comes in. If you have insurance, that's good for something like that. But now we have health insurance up the wazoo where people are they've got the sniffles and they decide to go to a doctor instead of just taking some Tylenol at home. And it's created this monster insurance industry that is able to just increase the cost of everything. If we have free market, all these things things are cheaper. Health insurance, health care is far more affordable if you have a free market system. And the people who can afford it, there was a time, I remember Ron Paul when he was running in 2012 talking about, when he was growing up, the churches did a lot of fundraisers to help people pay their medical bills, which it's become a lot less today. There's a lot less private charity, and there's a lot more government theft to give so-called benefits, and costs are increasing, and it just creates this massive corrupt system, and it invites corruption.
Oh, I mean, anything that government gets its hands on invites corruption. You mentioned cost, Seth, and I remember when they were debating the whole Affordable Care Act and the health insurance, and Bernie Sanders starts talking that everybody's entitled to health insurance and all that. And I remember prior to the Affordable Care Act, I used to always look at markets and premiums, and you could get you could have gotten health insurance for $129 or $99, but there was premiums that were pretty cheap. It's not that healthcare insurance was unavailable. Oh, it was available. What the problem that should have targeted in Congress is the cost, the after hospital cost, that when you go, for a heart attack or heart attack care or anything, emergency room, they stick you with a $500 bill or a $1,000 bill, and you can't pay for that. That is what Congress should have done. The healthcare cost to bring it down, not the healthcare insurance, because anybody could have gotten insurance because there was a free market back then. I remember when I was living in Virginia and I was looking at plans for healthcare. I mean, I could have gotten one for $135 or $150 or $110. I mean, it's not that they were not available. They were available, but people were selling this dream. Politicians were selling this dream to make healthcare affordable, to make health insurance affordable, health insurance available, not affordable, but available. And that really ticked me off. And now we're in this debacle with Affordable Care, where I know that Obama and Sanders wanted and a few other ones wanted a single payer system like they have in Cuba, like they have in Europe, in many European countries, in Mexico, and they couldn't get to that, so they did this state exchange program that's just a fiasco, mess of corruption and greed and all that, and. I remember when I had a private insurance, Kaiser Permanente. I hope that, you never have to have it, Seth, because Kaiser Permanente is Bernie Sanders' dream of private insurance. It's a single payer private insurance. They have their own hospitals. They have their own doctors. You can go out of network, but it's very expensive to go out of network. So you don't want that. You want choice. You want freedom. And here's another point. Back then, the Tea Party movement and the conservatives were saying, my doctor, my choice, my doctor, my friend, my freedom. And now when Roe versus Wade, the liberals were saying that exact same thing. My doctors, my liberty. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? It's a contradiction of political fiasco, political theatership. That's all it is.
Yeah, and you kind of look at the way they basically they pit each other against, they pit everybody against each other. It's kind of like a divide and conquer strategy that you get hypocrisy from both sides, and nobody has standards, nobody has principles. It's just when it's my side pushing something that's big government, we justify it, and the other side complains saying you're attacking our liberty, and then the other side does their own big government stuff and justify it, and then the other side's complaining about their liberty, and liberty should be the guiding standard for everything that the federal government does, and it's not even there at all. It's all about how do we take care of people, and that's not the job of government. The government's not there to take care of us, and even when we do have an actual free market system, there's always going to be people in need. There's always going to be people who need help, and they need a hand up, and I believe when we're free, that people help each other out. I think we talked about this, a while ago, about when it comes to like hurricane relief and stuff, and you go back to I forgot who the president was, but I wrote about something that happened back in the 1800s, and basically the federal government did not provide any relief for natural disasters, and the American people wound up giving more to help clean up. So I believe people want to help each other out, but the incentive to help each other out is killed when you have this massive government that's telling us, oh, no, we're here to take care of you.
Yeah, and you mentioned previously Romney Care, and I'm not sure if Romney Care in Massachusetts had federal funds. I'm sure it did. I'm not sure. I don't know if it had some federal funds from the Department of Health and Human Services, but that's if it did not have federal assistance from the DHS, that's from HHS, that's fine. And if it's just Massachusetts with Massachusetts money, more power to them. That's one thing that I really liked about Calvin Coolidge. When he was governor of Massachusetts, he was a very progressive governor of Massachusetts. But once he got to the national stage, once he got to be vice president and president in 1923, he stopped being a progressive. He stopped being a tax-spend president, a tax-spend politician, and respected the Constitution, respected individual liberty and sovereignty all across the states. And I know you wrote an article on Grover Cleveland that there was natural disasters. Calvin Coolidge, there was a natural disaster that affected him with the Mississippi flood, and he sent Herbert Hoover down there to examine the situation. And Arkansas Senator Callaway got angry with Coolidge and said that if his native Vermont would have been in the flood, would have had a flood, he would have been up there examining the situation and helping his native Vermont. Well, the joke's on the Arkansas senator. There was a flood in Vermont, and Coolidge did not go there because even though he's a native of Vermont, he cannot pick and choose favoritism. He cannot play favoritism politics on the states, because that's not what the role of federal government is. And that's something that we always see the federal government, whether it's Bush with Katrina or Obama with Sandy or Trump with Texas. You can't play favorite politics and you can't just go just because, Texas is Republican, has a Republican majority and has always been voted Republican in every single election, or Obama with New Jersey, or Louisiana being a swing state but mostly Republican. You can't do that. You cannot play favoritism politics, and that's what that's the curse of you have this federal government where you play favoritism, when you have nepotism, and that's totally wrong. Totally wrong.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Nepotism, corruption is invited when you get the government involved, and it kind of just this whole discussion kind of reminds me of an old Davy Crockett speech called "Not Yours to Give." When he actually voted against giving money to a widow who he believed that the widow should be taken care of and everything, but he said not through government. It's not yours to give, and that's really the principle here. Is the government should only collect taxes or funds from the people to pay for its limited, legitimate authority. And that's it. And everything else should be, through free market and free interactions between people. People will want to help each other out and, help people out when they're in need. But it's through their own free will that they should be doing it, not through force. And that gets the old libertarian line that I tend to believe in, is that taxation is theft. So it's just that's the principle that should guide us. Davy Crockett, not yours to give. That's what should be guiding our politicians. But when there's so many people who are benefiting from the plunder of government stealing from all the taxpayers, it's hard to make that case because too many people are reliant on this system, and we need to get back to self-reliance.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I do recall that quote from David Crockett, "Not yours to give," and that's exactly right. I mean, when I saw Obama with Christie giving a big hug, and then giving X amount of dollars to New Jersey for, I lived through Sandy because Sandy went through Northern Virginia, and I got a little rain, and when I got up to Jersey, and Jersey got a little rain, New Jersey, it's a crappy state, and that's why it went to ruin. But no, you're right. It's not yours to give. It's my money, and it should come back to me. And that's where taxation. I think the 16th Amendment is sanctioned robbery. It's sanctioned robberies. The sanctioned robbery amendment, where you have a license to steal, and you've given the thief the license to steal and take away your money. And with the creation of the Revenue Act of 1913 and other acts that came forward to that, and it's really despicable. And one more thing I want to say, this also misinterpretation of the supremacy clause. And they always said, well, now the Affordable Care Act, which also, it involves the Commerce Clause, but it's the supreme law of the land. And people misinterpret the Supremacy Clause. Just because it's an act of Congress, it doesn't make it supreme. It's only supreme, and I don't know if you're gonna. It's only supreme if it's constitutional. And if it's not constitutional, then the states have a right to refuse it. And people have misinterpreted that as they interpret the Commerce Clause.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, you brought up the 16th Amendment. I think that's kind of one of the things is that the 17th Amendment, where the direct election of senators by the people rather than the state governments choosing the senators. Back when the states were choosing the senators instead of the people, the senators were being chosen by and large to protect the state interests. States' rights were far more honored at that time before the 17th Amendment. So I think that's a big cause to help lead to the misinterpretation of the supremacy clause. And that's, I talk a lot about education. On my Substack, I've written a lot of stuff on education, and there's absolutely nothing in the Constitution that gives any authority to the federal government when it comes to education. Now, I'm a believer in eliminating all government schooling, including at the state level. But the states do have the right to set up their own. Most state constitutions have in it that they'll provide schooling to the children of their state. And as much as I don't believe even at the state level they should be doing it, at least they have the right to. But what's happened with the federal government is dictating everything now when it comes to education, because everybody's going out after those federal dollars for this education program or that education program. And so, the federal government's taken over everything, and there is no local control anymore, and people need to combat that and combat the federal overreach.
Yeah, and with the federal government involved in education, that was a horrible mistake. But Jimmy Carter made that promise to the teachers union, and that got him elected in '76. And then you have you brought up the 17th Amendment, and the 17th Amendment, was supposed to be more people representative. If you look at everything what has happened, it has become more unrepresented than represented. It has brought more corruption than even when state legislators were appointing their people to the National Senate. And with the creation of the 17th Amendment, it has created this populist bubble and this populist dependency of, you see Ted Cruz, you see Marco Rubio, you see Dick Durbin, you see Bernie Sanders, you see Feinstein, which, Feinstein now they're wheeling her in a wheelchair. You see all these senators fighting over cut the loot. No, I want this. No, I want this. Wait a minute. Hold on. This was not supposed to be that way. Oh, I want this healthcare insurance for California. I want this. And I'm like, wait a minute, this was not how, back then in the 1800s, yes, there was a problem with hard labor, but, there was a thing where senators respected your own state, respected their sins as, hey, we're not going to give you money for that because that's not in the Constitution. And James Madison vetoed a public works bill because, a national public works bill, because he did not believe in a national highway system, because that was not. It was supposed to be to work together, and the federal government to administer that work together. And if the federal government the Supreme Court would have said, you know what, California, you need to revise your law, and you need to make it easier for this IOR farmer to conduct business with you. If your legislators don't want to do that, then that's all we got to do. You have to play ball. If you don't want to play ball and Iowa cannot afford to go to California, then Iowa, I suggest you look at other areas to conduct your business on pork. But that's the main thing of the Commerce Clause, is for states to work together and the federal government to just be an administrator, not to conduct judicial review, not to conduct regulatory force, and to kick it back to the legislature in each individual state and to review your law and to make it better. And my last thought is, read the Commerce Clause very carefully. Read documents of the Commerce Clause, and it was not meant for Congress to regulate. It was meant for Congress to administer and for everybody to act good and to play good and to work good to make this a more perfect union.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I mean, that's the whole idea of our founding. It's clear in the writings. It's clear in the speeches of the founding fathers. Was we're going to be an independent nation, and we declare our independence, and we just want to do our own thing, and instead we've turned into this this empire that wants to control everything, and so we've completely flipped the intentions of this nation's founding upside down, and we need to be working to tip it back to the right direction and make it right side up again.
Exactly. So with that said, your final notice, we got to work back to individualism. My final notice is the same thing. So we have to get back to the true meaning of the Commerce Clause and the true meaning of the framers. And we'll touch base next week, right, Seth, with another issue of restoring the Constitution.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, have everybody a great night and a great week ahead. And thanks again, Seth, and we'll be joining again.
Yep, good night.